I'm Melanie Schaefer, and this is Mel on the Street, where we dive into what's actually happening behind the story and not just the headline. And today I'm joined by Dev Randhawa, CEO of F3 Uranium. Dev, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So, just to start off, there's been a lot of discussion around uranium over the past few years, but exploration success is it's still incredibly rare. When you look at the sector today, what separates a uranium project that's genuinely getting more interesting from one that's, I guess, just simply generating a lot of news flow?
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to hit high grade. You know that there's a lot of people exploring, a lot of money gets sent into, lots of people raise money, but very few people actually have, much high grade. What I mean by high grade is the Athabasca in Canada is very different. It's below the surface. You can't take surface samples, whereas in Namibia, other places on the surface, but it's very low grade. I'll give you an example. Our The average grade in the basin is 2% uranium. Namibia is zero point 0.1. Australia is zero point 0.1. They're very low grade, but some are closer to the surface. But a lot of companies don't care about the grade if they've already got a full supply system, because uranium is only 3 to 5% of the overall cost. But to be successful, I believe, if someone says they're successful, had been in the industry for 30 years, you've got to have high grade uranium. You just got to have it. And we've been very fortunate to make significant discoveries 4 times. We've sold 2 of those companies, went up to 1.1 billion. So that would what sets us apart than all the others.
So just to break it down for viewers who aren't geologists, which is probably a lot, or most of my viewers, what makes one uranium property worth spending money on while another might get passed?
Well, that's a great question, and that's the great, difficult question. What When we get a uranium property, it's like a puzzle, and because you can't see on surface, you have to kind of X-ray the land, lack of a better word. And all uranium in the basin, the Athabasca, which is the richest basin in the world, Saudi Arabia of uranium in the world, you have to look what's called conductors. So you shoot an X-ray, you find that. Then you go on the ground, do ground geophysics. You're doing a lot of geophysics, geoscience to determine where it might go. So I think that's really the next question, always is, where do you start and where do you go? And that's what sets us apart, is that, we found Waterbury, sold that to Denison, found Triple R, we sold that to Paladin for $1 billion, as I mentioned. So be able to find the right land. Obviously, one of the places you look always is around other mines, right? If there's a uranium mine within 50 miles, maybe the mineralization continues. So you look for other mines, and then you fly it and determine it's worth keeping. Geophysics and that kind of stuff isn't that expensive, but drilling is very expensive in the basin. So you have to be very careful before you start drilling. So that's what, again, sets us apart from the others, is our serial record of success.
So yeah, I want to pivot now to some of the news after we recently announced its 2026 summer exploration program across Patterson Lake North, Minto, and Broach. When you look at that program, what are the main technical questions that you're trying to answer there?
Well, does the mineralization continue? You can remember there are 2 giant deposits next to us. One is NextGen's Arrow, which is, $5-10 billion worth of, it's already trading at that. It's worth probably $100 billion in resources. And you got next door a $2 billion company that owns $1 billion asset. So these are giants in the area. So we feel, and what you're looking for, believe it or not, they tend to be in a pretty straight line. Now they might be a kilometer apart, sorry, a mile apart, 2 miles apart, but they are in a row. So you're trying to go, which is this corridor that we can hit into? And recently, the reason we're very happy with Broach and some of these others, our neighbor, Paladin from Australia, has hit near our area. So, you wonder if you fly it to see if there are conductors there, and then you start to ground geophysics and other kinds of things that allow you to, before you drill. Like, all that can cost you 100 grand, but 5 drill holes can cost you 2 million. So you got to be very careful before you. Remember, junior companies aren't like big multi-billion-dollar company, they can blow, $2-3 million and go, well, whatever. We have to be very careful. We've got X number of resources. F3, we're lucky to have 22 million in the bank, but not everybody does. So it is a process to say who's in the area, does it continue, and does it? I mean, if you look at NextGen, we found Triple R, and they did a conductor 3 kilometers over, bang, they found something even bigger. So if you find some discovery, people tend to look in that area.
So speaking of the drilling and the costs, when those drill results start coming out, what should people actually be looking for? Is it grade, like width,
All grade.
location? Or is it a combination?
It's mostly grade, and then you ask how much of it. Like if you're hitting 2%. So uranium is different. I should mention that. Most of the time, for example, in gold and copper, you get the results and you've got to wait 30, 60, 90, maybe even more, depending how busy the labs are. They have to assay it. You have to have third party, control of the, if you get core, you split it, half you keep, half you send to the lab just for audit purposes. So, but with every other commodity, you have to wait till it's not true in uranium. If you, every time it comes out of the ground, you run a scintillometer over it, and you can tell right away if it's high grade. One, it looks very black, called pitch blende, and two, you run the scintillometer on it, and it calls what counts per second. If you hit something over 10,000 counts per second, it means you've hit high grade. So as soon as it comes out of the ground, we know it's high grade. What we don't know the exact percentage until we get the results from the assay lab, which can be up to 3 months away. So when we're drilling this year, people are looking for us to announce that we've hit high grade through high counts per second. So that's what uranium is about. When we're drilling, that's what they need to look at.
So what you're telling me that is you're able to get a good idea when you're
Right away.
seeing the
Right away.
and then you direct or change course with the drill.
Yeah.
Okay. But the investor isn't going to know that
Right away. Yeah. In fact, in our history of the company, there's not a complete linear equation between saying you hit 20,000 counts per second or 50,000 counts per second or 5. It's not 4 times. It's actually an algorithm. So it could be 2% and it hits 40. It could be 50% uranium. So there's no real linear, but they know it's high grade. You've got something they don't know. So once you've got the grade, you want width. And, whether it's 1 or 2 kilometers or it's 10 kilometers. Like in, for example, Cigar Lake, their deposits, you take that, they could fit into a big soccer stadium in Europe or the Superdome in New Orleans. If that deposit could be 50 million pounds right there worth 5 billion. So you don't need a lot of land when it comes to uranium because it's so high grade. Think of normal uranium in the Athabasca, like super high grade gold nuggets when it comes to the gold business. Like you don't need a lot of nuggets, as you can imagine, which are chunks of them in a stadium to be worth 5 billion. That's the same thing with uranium. But it's high grade. It's expensive.
Yeah, so if we just sort of zoom in for a minute, talk about the Tetra Zone, which attracts a lot of attention because it challenged some of the traditional thinking, around exploration in the core water domain. What assumptions changed, and why does that matter from a geological perspective?
Well, the JR zone, we've drilled it out, and it's 12% uranium. That's 6 times the normal in the Athabasca, 6,000 times the world standard. So we had that up there. And then what happened was kind of weird. We noticed when we do a fly over the area, there was a chunk of land that there was no showings at all. We thought that was kind of weird. And so then Sam and Ray thought, maybe there's a mud cover there because there's no way these conductors go here and stop and start again. So sure enough, we swapped land with somebody and they had it, we got it, and we've hit and made two very Think of uranium as pearls on a necklace. And if you have enough pearls, you've got a big deposit. We have found two. What we noticed was somebody had never bothered assaying some of the old holes. We did that. Then we drilled over here. So you're almost, 1.4 kilometers apart, two holes showing 0.4%. It's not high grade, but it tells you there's an old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. We knew there. So we started drilling in between. So what makes Tetra exciting is just the amount, it's a length of mineralization, like it's kilometers. And we have drill holes on each end, on the bookends. So we're trying to find out what's in between. It's a lot of land, and it's on strike with Triple R and the Arrow, which are billion-dollar deposits.
Yeah, so speaking more to that, when the discovery challenges an existing model, as you just sort of highlighted, how do you separate something that's genuinely meaningful, I guess, from something that's interesting, but it's still too early to draw?
Sure. It always comes down to drilling. But, you at the end of the day, it's it's got to be size. You've got to have, like, say, an area that's showing mineralization, uranium mineralization over a kilometer or two. That's one thing you do need. But then after that, you got to make sure you're hitting pearls in between. So it's the length of mineralization and the high grade hits in between. So that's why Tetra has got the potential to be a monster. But we've obviously got to prove that. We've got two chunks of high grade uranium over 2%, but we don't have enough of it to say we've got something. But again, you have to look at the big picture and go, you've got the Cameco, NextGens, Paladins, ISO, they're billion-dollar markets. After that, there is no exploration company except us where we've actually hired a third party to come in and say, what have we got? Tell us, audit us. And the JR zone is showing 10.8 million pounds of 12%. Our company right now is valuated, as a third party said, only based on those pounds. We're getting zero value for anything else in it. So that's why Tetra is also important market wise. We want to show the market that we have more than this beautiful drilled out satellite deposit. We want to show that we got a second project that can turn into a deposit. So from a market perspective, that's why it's also important.
Yeah, Dev, I mean, a few minutes ago, we were talking about how you can see, you can get a good idea of what's going to come out in the assays when the core comes out of the ground.
Right.
But I want to talk for a minute about those geophysical tools that you use and the surveys for people, again, who don't live in the technical side of
Sure.
it. What tools actually and I want to ask you about the timeline going forward for.
Sure. Well, we've done all that. That's all been done. We're starting to drill here this week and next week, and we're already on that. But I'm not a geoscientist, so I'm going to butcher it. But basically, we combine it with geological tools. You have to kind of bring the two together, right? You have to, but the main part is like basically shooting X-rays, different types, to figure out what's down there. If everything is uniform, you'll do an airborne and nothing. But suddenly these lines will show up. And if you look on our website, you got these little blue squiggly lines, and those show up. That tells you, okay, all uranium comes up through a graphitic conductor because that's the best source rock. So all uranium comes up through graphitic conductor, but not all graphitic conductors have high grade uranium. So you got lots of conductors. You have 100 of them on your property. And then you've got to do ground geophysics. You go down and basically shoot electricity down and figure out what the response is, right? And those are the kind of things that we've got on our website. There's a great systematic way of how we go about looking for this. And then we also will take samples on the ground, see if we can get some chemistry. For example, there are indicator minerals. Like when we drill, but if we don't find any uranium, but we find boron, we like it. Which means because that's it's an indicator of that's usually what's associated with uranium. So that's kind of those are indicator minerals. Like in diamonds, they had kimberlites, they had garnets. we have boron and these kinds of things. So, for example, one of the reasons we love the conductor on along J1A1 where it combines with B1, the boron numbers were off the roof. So we're still trying to figure out it's in the area, but where is it? So there are lots of tools that can help.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me into what I was going to ask next, because like the Athabasca Basin has produced some of the world's most important uranium discoveries,
Yeah,
but that also means it gets a lot of attention. Can you talk a little bit about how much location matters in uranium exploration, and where an
sure.
investor, like where are they overstating the importance of being near other discoveries?
Well, okay, I would say that at the end of the day, yes. But the other thing that's like in uranium, sorry, in real estate, you and I both know it's always location, 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 right? But in junior stocks, it's management, 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 management. Um, like good people just know what to look for, what are false signals, what are good signals, right? Our team has been doing this, like I said, our core team has been together, almost 20 years. I make sure they're well paid, almost as much as me, so they feel like they're partners. They stick around, and we built a lot of companies together. But our track record allows us to raise money fairly straightforward. Like I said, last fall we raised 25 million pretty quickly, which is a lot of money for a junior company. So location is important from the deposit. So you have to have a good track record to get the money, right? Because you're going to believe done it before. So the next step is to say which lands, and it's usually in the area or you've done a cheap airborne, and to find out if there's conductors. You find lots of conductors, you stake the land. That's kind of how. Then you stake the land. Once you've got it, you start doing work on it. It's pretty systematic, but there's no. But the key is all starts with good management, and that's what sets us apart from others. Is that we've got a track record in the industry of finding uranium. Like it's our fourth. Not many people have found one. Actually, very few people have found one. Some have found two. Nobody's found three. No one's found four. So that's what sets us apart. And because we also been with doing it for a while, we know when we get false signals. We have like today false media. We all learning what that is, but at the same time, you have to know what the real thing is, and that's what sets us apart from other companies.
And if we just like zoom in just for a minute before we wrap up and talk about the portfolio, the JR and Tetra zones, when you're looking across the property portfolio, what characteristics would make a target worth advancing? And what are the signs that tell you an area deserves more work?
Well, I hope not to sound repeat myself, but number one, it has to be you have to have graphitic conductors, and it has to be what they call the Patterson Lake corridor. There are different corridors that are very famous through it, and you try to be on those things. It doesn't mean you don't have crosscuts. So the number one thing is, um, are there deposits in the area? Number one, we know that there's two monster deposits here. Okay, what are the conductors that run through them? What's the corridor? Let's find that corridor and back up along the way. Because if you honestly, Mel, if you take a line between Cigar Lake and all these major deposits, it was right in a straight line. It might have been over 200 kilometers, but it was a straight line, right? Because that was the corridor that they're following. We have one called Patterson Lake. There's a couple of others, and we find them. So we look for the projects with that, that zone, because geology doesn't care if you own that land or I own the land. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so we look for those big deposits, then for the conductors, then you go on the ground and do some more testing. Like I said, that stuff is cheap. It's a few hundred grand. But when you're putting together a $2 to $5 million program, you've got to make sure. The word I've heard often is you vector in, right? Because if you blow 5 million of investors' money, you don't find anything, they're going to question your next chunk, right? Um, and right now, on that note, the sentiment for uranium is very poor right now. Indicator for our industry is spot. It's trading at a massive discount to the net present value of its assets. So it's a really good time for investors to buy uranium stocks because we're getting close to the end of August where the contracting starts and uranium prices tend to rise and the stocks go up with it. But so it's a good time for our interview because it's the right opportunity. If you're a contrarian, unfortunately, very few investors these days, are contrarian. They're more momentum players. So, but no, I think we're in a great place in the overall space. I just to mention, there's more energy used by data centers in America than the entire country. Italy uses electricity. So, as long as that demand's there, they're going to need. You need energy, and ideally, it's clean energy, and you can crank it up. The problem with the wind and air is you can't tell the wind to go faster or get more sun. So that's why uranium is in a good place. I've been doing it for 30 years. And if there was a perfect storm for $100 uranium, $200 uranium, this is it. Like I said, it's a very small part of the cost. When you see Microsoft, 3 Mile Island was a bad thing. Now it's a good thing. Microsoft bought it and going, we need the energy. And it's just data centers are driving the demand. That's what I think is a great time to be in uranium, and I think we have the right management team. We got 25 million in the bank, um, and as a result, I think we should be a part of people's portfolio.
Yeah, and I mean, like you don't have to look very far in the media or in the news to see all of the talk about the data centers that are going up,
Yeah,
across Canada,
yeah.
certainly in the Toronto area as well. But just lastly, to sort of zoom out and talk about nuclear power and energy security, how much do you think that macro backdrop actually influences the decisions that you're going to be making across your portfolio, and where the uranium price is in general?
Well, a good sign. Well, right now uranium is in the 80s, there's two types of uranium prices: spot price and long-term price. Is a place traditionally where the one nuclear plant needed uranium and they weren't getting like a cup of sugar. Can I borrow a cup of uranium? It's right now, today's price. I have to deliver today. Whereas long term, I can, it's mostly 5 year contracts, 3 year contracts. So right now it's 105. So there's a big gap, which is weird. It shouldn't be that big, but it is. So I think what you'll see is like the demand, for example, just for nuclear reactors alone. Right now, we produce about 190. The demand is 190 million pounds in 2040, which is only 14 years away. We need almost double that. That's just based on how many reactors are being built as we speak and are in proposed and et cetera. That's just it. China is obviously leading. They've been going hard at uranium. We were stuck in, woke land and thought, oh, well, the wind and air will do it. But obviously it didn't work. Um, uh, and so you've got 14 years to double the amount of uranium. But the problem is the Kazakhs run 40%. They're going to stay there or go down, is my own guess. Where do we get it from? Canada's the best place. US. However, permitting, Mel, is atrocious. Like once you find a mine, you're 10, 14 years away of putting it in production thanks to Canada's ridiculous regime system. So, what does that mean? If we need it by 2014, we have to make discoveries today, right away in the next couple of years to get them ready for that time. That's the sad part about, but people don't realize uranium prices can go insane in a few years. But unfortunately, investors only care about what the next weeks do. But the opportunity because of demand of data centers, which are run by whoever, the reality is whoever can do best with AI, but they can't do without data. Data centers. Data centers need energy. Where are you going to get it from? Certainly not going to be wind and air, right? They consistently show they're not reliable. Um, where are you going to go? You've got to go to nuclear. I think everybody's waking up. You saw some of the announcements from the U.S. administration. You've seen it from every country because they're realizing it's clean power. People don't realize one large nuclear plant, the entire waste is a Pepsi can, right? That's it. It's the only industry that pays for its own waste. Oil, gas, coal. None of them take care of their own waste. So I think it's a perfect time to be in the nuclear business. Primarily, be all driven by. We thought it was EV vehicles, maybe, but really nothing touches the demand. And when you see Microsoft joining the Nuclear Association, you know they've woke up. If they woke up, imagine what happens when everybody wakes up to that reality. Back in the 70s, trains, train companies, railroads owned uranium places. GE was the largest player in nuclear. Oil companies were in it. So I won't be surprised if you see Meta, buying, some of these others. The other thing I've noticed in the last 6 months, how many countries are coming to Canada. Big Aussie companies. I won't name them. We talked to them. You know, Eastern companies are coming in, realizing the only hope for nuclear power really is Canada, because our grades are high, therefore the costs will be low. The grades are low in the U.S. and the costs are high. So that's why Canada stands to be possibly the leader. But we, as a, because the high grade, but we need to do something about our rules. It'll take too long to put these things in production.
Dev, can you just tell me what differentiates F3 from all of the other, junior uranium stories out there?
Well, just the name F3 tells you there was an F1, F2. Our track record. We were also we had a project we liked. The Korean Electric Power Company from Korea came, so we'll fund all the exploration, and we'll take 50% for 15 million. We only put 100 grand into it. We eventually sold that for 128 million, our 100 grand, to Denison. We took the non-core assets, started F2, Fission Uranium, made a big discovery. Paladin bought that for 1.1 billion. And then now F3, we got this smaller deposit as big as our F1, and it's 12%. So, and now we've got Tetra. We found another. So to keep finding it is no fluke. It means you got to have good management, well funded by bankers. So you can have that. And by the way, Rick Rule funded my very first exploration company in 1996.
It's funny how everything sort of just goes full circle, right? And I do think it's good that you've mentioned and told the story of how F1 and F2 sort of merged into, or I guess became.
But we split. What happens in these situations? If you own an F1 share, you can sell that to Denison. You get shares of Denison. We give you a free share in the new company. So it's a dividend. We didn't start new companies. So, Melanie, if you owned a share in 2007 of Strathmore, a company that Rick Rule and Eric Sprott helped me with, we gave you, if you look in your account today, you'd have a share of Energy Fuels. We sold the U.S. assets for shares. We sold those F1 to Denison, F2 to Paladin, and now you have F3 and F4. So literally, you would have, share of Energy Fuels, Denison, Paladin, F3, F4. We don't start new companies. We give you a free share in the new one. So what, like literally, it's like a dividend, free dividend of our companies. Nobody else has done that.
It's amazing. And thank you so much for taking the time to explain that. If we could just finish up by asking you what investors can look forward to over the next 12 months and 18 months. What's the timeline?
Well, we have enough money to keep drilling for the next, have news on Tetra and new areas like Broach and things like that. We're quite excited with. We're going to keep drilling. Hopefully, we hit more pearls on a necklace. That would be ideal, obviously, on Tetra. We might go back and explore other areas. But and unfortunately, whether I like it or not, the price of the stock will be a reflection of what we do. Also, uranium price. We had nothing like this, and our stock went to 55 cents. Today, it sits at 15 cents. So nothing we've done, but the market got so hyped up that all the money poured into it. And all the momentum money then left us went to gold and silver and etc. over the last year. So we don't have the same, people aren't jumping into it like they were. However, the perfect storm in a positive way for uranium is there. Simply demand for electricity. That's it. That's why it should be back in people's monitors.
I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank everybody for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more episodes of Mel on the Street. Thanks again, Deb.